There was a lot of heat put on this Iowa Hawkeyes football program last season. You know, when you go 8-5 and you take as much heat as they took last season, you're still in pretty good shape as a program. Can the black and gold get enough of an improvement on the offensive side of the ball to make it back to Indianapolis for the second time in 3 seasons?
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
For as great as this Iowa defense, especially at taking the football away these last couple of seasons has been, here I sit, maybe not talking about, maybe not praising this Iowa defense and how great it's been. Instead, we're here talking about the offensive side of the football. For as good of a job as Phil Parker has done as a defensive coordinator on that side, it's kind of the other end of the spectrum for Brian Ferentz and this offense, because I believe it's this offense and their lack of productivity that maybe has held back the success of what this Iowa team can truly accomplish, because they've got it figured out on defense, and they got to figure something out, though, on the offensive side of the ball. There's 131 teams in FBS. Yeah, they finished 130th in the country in total offense. Iowa has been able to crack the top 90 in offense only one time under Brian Ferentz. That's since 2017. Iowa has finished in the triple digits in total offense 3 times in the last 6 seasons. Now, Iowa has never really been an offensive powerhouse. You know, they're Greg Davis or Brian Ferentz, but even that being considered, last season was still very tough to watch, even though Iowa has never really been an offensive powerhouse, especially in recent memory. You got to go back to maybe the mid or early 2000s, you know, when they were a lot better on the offensive side of the ball. But there's a lot of expectations this season, right? For as poor as they were on the offensive side of the ball, this should be an offense that should rebound and be better, thus giving Iowa a fighting chance to get back to the Big Ten championship game. You look at those names on the graphic. We're going to cover them all throughout this preview, but this is an Iowa offense that needs to get better. Okay, they finished 130th. Just get me to 90. Get me to 80, and you combine that with what they have on defense, and this could be a really, really good Iowa football team this season that could maybe make their way to a Big Ten championship and be the final Big Ten West champions. Now, as I've said on offense, this is a team that is making significant upgrades across the board on the offensive side of the football, right? You look at Spencer Petras and what he was not able to do last year. Now you bring in transfer quarterback Cade McNamara, and that's a guy that you're hoping he can kind of step up from multiple levels from where Spencer Petras was. Of course, when you take a look at Cade McNamara, this is a guy that won a Big Ten championship back at Michigan in 2021. He threw for over 2,500 yards, 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions in that season. He has good ability. He can make throws, but it's kind of dependent on a couple of things. It's dependent on the offensive line giving him time, because he was behind a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line at Michigan. I think another thing is the ability to lean on a run game where you're maybe not expected to go out there and be a playmaker, where maybe you're not expected to throw 25 or 30 passes a game and really put up 250 to 300 yards a game. I don't know if I want to throw the label of game manager on Cade McNamara, but maybe a little bit notch above that. He can make plays when he needs to. He protects the football, he can lean on the run game, and he can lean on a really good defense. The run game and the offensive line are things that are very important to the development of Cade McNamara going forward in this offense. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. I believe Cade McNamara is a perfect fit for what Iowa wants to do on the offensive side of the ball. We know this is a team in their history, in the past, has been a team that has normally has some beef up on their offensive line, has been able to lean on the run game, and then they've been able to work off of that with play action, especially going to their tight ends. You know we're going to talk about Iowa's tight ends in this preview, and of course, throughout time at Iowa, leaning on a very good defense as well. And that's the system that Cade McNamara really finds himself in. So good on him to find himself in a system that he can really work well in, and that's exactly what they have at Iowa. It fits really well to what Cade McNamara's skill set is. Now, as I said, one important key to Cade McNamara being successful is the run game, and they found their guy in the backfield late last season in Kaleb Johnson. He really emerged as RB1 in this Iowa offense last season, 779 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground. How about 406 yards and 3 touchdowns in the month of November, those final 4 regular season games? So as I said, coming on late in the season, of course, the game against Purdue, that was the big one, right? 22 carries, 200 yards and a score against the Boilermakers on November 5th. As well. That was the second highest single game rushing performance in Iowa history by a freshman. Honorable mention, all Big Ten as well last season. It's just when Kaleb Johnson gets going, he builds momentum, he runs downhill, so to speak, he can be successful. You throw in LaShawn Williams in that backfield as well, 412 yards, 2 touchdowns last season, a solid number 2 option in the backfield for the Hawkeyes. So if Cade McNamara can lean on this run game, I believe Kaleb Johnson could be a 1,000-yard rusher if this offensive line can improve. Let's talk about this offensive line. Last season, it was a young offensive line. This was a growing offensive line, and you bring back a lot of guys from last season. They're trying to find, the Iowa Hawkeyes are trying to find their next Tristan Wirfs, their next Tyler Linderbaum on that offensive line. Can they find it this year, right? When you talk about this O-line, Logan Jones, Bo Stephen, Mason Richmond, the thing I like about these kids, these were all very talented, highly recruited, 4-star guys coming out of high school, and they have logged some snaps early in their Iowa career. You look at Logan Jones, started all 13 games at center last season. Very good option at center. How about Bo Stevens? Started in 10 games last year at right guard. Nick DeJong started 8 games at left guard. He was kind of hurt in the middle of the season, forced a little bit of shuffling on the Hawkeye offensive line. Connor Colby started games left guard and right tackle. He kind of came in for DeJong there in the injury. How about Mason Richmond at left tackle? When you talk about protecting your quarterback, those tackles are very key. 2022 Big Ten honorable mention for him. 3rd team preseason All Big Ten according to Athlon Sports headed into the season. Missed a majority of spring practice this spring with an injury as well. So you bring back all these guys. The experience coming back for Iowa will be big. I could see them making a jump as an offensive line because they are solid talent. These are good players up front. There's some good beef up front for the Iowa Hawkeyes, and it's up to them. I really believe the offensive line might be the biggest key of the success of Iowa because Cade McNamara, he succeeds best when he's got a clean pocket to throw to. If defenses can maybe get Cade moving around a little bit, that could maybe cause some issues, and this offensive line needs to be good to get that running game going a little bit to maybe take some of the pressure off of Cade, and then maybe he can get things going down the field in the play action as well. I could see on the offensive line transfers Rusty Feth and Dejon Parker providing some depth as well. You look at Feth, the transfer from Miami, Ohio, started 34 games across his career over the Red Hawks. You look at second team All-MAC. I see depth in the interior offensive line. I'm out there for Feth. For Parker, a transfer from Saginaw Valley State. Injured during spring ball, but an experienced depth type of guy. I see the offensive line getting better at Iowa this season, which is going to be big if that running game is going to be better. If Kaleb Johnson is going to be a 1,000-yard rusher, it starts with the offensive line. If the offensive line is good, this Iowa offense is going to make a jump up. If they don't improve a ton, we'll see what happens with the Iowa Hawkeyes. There may be some questions. Now, when you talk about the offensive line, you talk about the quarterback, you talk about the run game. Now, there was a little bit, Iowa fans might have been a little bit concerned kind of early in this offseason process, right? Because you saw guys, Keegan Johnson entered the transfer portal. Arlen Bruce is gone as well, and there wasn't much at wide receiver. Is there? When you look at Keegan Johnson, 352 yards and 2 touchdowns his freshman season in 2021, right? He was a 4-star guy that a lot of people thought was the big-time playmaker, the future of that position at wide receiver. Of course, injuries held him out pretty much all of last season. That really held him back. He ended up transferring to Kansas State, so that was a big loss. Of course, Arlen Bruce, 19 catches, 187 yards, and a touchdown in 2022. So you lose those two guys, they needed to make moves, right? There were a few positions where they really needed to go into the transfer portal. Wide receiver was a big one, and they got 2 solid talents coming out of the transfer portal. The big one from within the Big Ten, Kaleb Brown, transfers over for Ohio State. Man, we know that Ohio State is wide receiver U. We know the type of talent that gets recruited there and eventually comes out of there. This guy was recruited high 4-star, top 75 kid when he came out, class of 2022. He brings the speed and the playmaking ability that is sorely needed at Iowa. I can really see him getting over the top of the defense. If Iowa can run the football, I could see Kaleb Brown making some big-time plays. He's got speed on the outside that you don't see a lot of times in Iowa City. So definitely a good pickup in the transfer portal there. How about Seth Anderson from Charleston Southern? Had a big year as a freshman in the FCS at Charleston Southern. Big South Offensive Freshman of the Year, 612 yards and 7 touchdowns last season. So you see another guy that packs a punch, that's got some speed on the outside that Iowa could definitely take advantage. So you get Kaleb Brown, you get Seth Anderson, and then you add on some experience coming back at wide receiver as well. And Nico Regaini coming back, 386 yards and a touchdown last season. He's been a solid contributor throughout his entire Iowa career. Like you go back to 2019 when he had 439 yards and 2 touchdowns. Can he break out in his final season? Be a guy that catches for 700, 800, maybe 4 or 5 touchdowns. That if they can get Nico Regaini to that level, that could really be a big boost for this Iowa Hawkeyes pass game. Deontay Vines provides some depth as well. 10 catches, 94 yards last season. He's more of a depth guy because of what this Iowa team has in their tight end room. We know Iowa is tight end U, especially in the Big Ten Conference, right? You look at last year, Sam Laporta. What he had been able to do in this offense the last 2 seasons. He was the leading receiver for the Hawkeyes of the last 2 seasons. Huge loss. You can go through the list of accolades, right? Of course, you go back to 670 yards and 3 touchdowns in 2021. Last season, 657 yards and a touchdown. The 34th overall pick of the Detroit Lions, which it seems like right now the Detroit Lions are just Iowa East at this point. All the players getting drafted and going over to Detroit. All-time tight end leader in receptions in Iowa history, second in receiving yards, Mackey Award finalist, right? What he'd been able to do, just another one in a line of great tight ends at Iowa. And they've got some more. Luke Lachey is the big one, of course, to focus on. Second in Iowa in receiving yards last season behind Laporta, 398 yards. He led the team in receiving touchdowns. He had 4 receiving touchdowns. Everybody else had 1. So he was definitely the touchdown threat on this offense last season. Big Ten, honorable mention last season. And then you bring in Michigan transfer Eric All. He was one of the big targets for Cade McNamara back in 2021. 437 yards, 2 scores, second on the team in receiving yards when Cade McNamara was the quarterback on that 2021 team. The chemistry between Eric All and Cade McNamara is going to be big when these two hit the field to start the season for the Iowa Hawkeyes. So you got Eric All out there. You got Luke Lachey out there. Let's try to get both these guys on the field at the same time because I really like the transfers that Iowa brought in, but the threats on the offense in terms of the passing game, I believe is at the tight end position. And I can see it right now what this offense is going to look like. Let's try to pound the football with Kaleb Johnson. Let's play action. Get it to our tight ends up the seam. Get it to our tight ends rolling out in the flat. This is an offense that I think flows well together with the personnel that they've put on the field. I like the improvements that Iowa has made on the offensive side of the ball. Now, are they going to be explosive? No. This is going to be a methodical offense that's going to be dependent on the power game, establishing a run and throwing off of it. If they struggle in the run game and this offensive line has trouble protecting Cade McNamara, they could run into some issues. But overall, definitely big improvements on the offensive side of the ball for the Iowa Hawkeyes. All right, let's have some fun. Let's have some fun, right? We were kind of a little down a little bit talking about the offense, although they made some improvements. Let's talk Iowa Hawkeyes defensive football, because what this team has done the last 2 seasons has been nothing short of absolutely outstanding. Phil Parker has built one of the best defenses in college football, regularly taking the football away with ease. They led the Big Ten in defensive touchdowns last season with 4. So not only can they take the football away, they are playmakers. They can put points up on the board. The defense can definitely do that. They were number 1 in the Big Ten in total defense and passing defense last season. But for as good as they were, there is a lot to replace on this defense. You look at guys, Jack Campbell, Seth Benson, Lucas Van Ness, Kayvon Merriweather, Riley Moss. Those are 5 big losses for this Iowa defense, especially Jack Campbell and Seth Benson in the middle at linebacker, number 1 and 2 on the team in tackles. How about this? Last season, they combined for 216 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and 3 interceptions. These are 2 of the best linebackers, especially Jack Campbell. These are 2 of the best guys to come through Iowa City at that position. Campbell, the Butkus Award winner as the country's top linebacker, Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. What he's been able to do and the plays he's been able to make the last few seasons has carried Iowa definitely on the defensive side of the football. Not many players, I don't care what program you're at, not many players are going to come through a program quite like Jack Campbell. Definitely unique in his skill set, no question about that. How about Riley Moss as well? First team All Big Ten last season, 11 interceptions over the course of his Iowa career. When you talk about the ball Hawkeyes, when you talk about the ability to create opportunities for the offense, it was Riley Moss, especially a couple of years back when he had all of those interceptions. He's second in his career, second in Iowa career interception yardage as well. So not only could he take the football away, he could do something with it as well. Riley Moss is a big loss. How about Lucas Van Ness on that defensive line? Man, he combined for 19 TFLs and 11 sacks over the last 2 seasons, drafted 13th overall by the Green Bay Packers. So you got defensive line, you got linebackers, you got defensive backs that need replacing. Now, despite all of that, this is still going to be one of the best secondaries in the Big Ten Conference this year, and they are led by Cooper DeJean, the turnover machine, right? Where Riley Moss left off in 2021, Cooper DeJean really stepped up in 2022. Last season, 5 interceptions, second in the Big Ten, 3 defensive touchdowns. You talk about creating with the football. Once the defense gets it in their hands, Cooper DeJean was a big part of that for Iowa. 59 tackles last season. First team All Big Ten, second team preseason All-American this season. He's going to be one of the top cornerbacks in the Big Ten. Defenses have to watch out for him because if he gets his hands on the football, he can create and he can make plays with the football. You go to safety, Quinn Schulte comes back. 72 tackles last season. He was 4th on the team. 6 pass breakups. A solid, reliable option back there at safety. How about Xavier Nwamka? This is a guy fans are very excited about over there. 4-star, highly recruited, talented guy that came into Iowa. Of course, what they had in the secondary last season, didn't see a ton of time on the field, but because of opt-outs and everything, and without Kayvon Merriweather in the secondary for that bowl game, he got the opportunity to step up against Kentucky, and he did. A 52-yard pick 6 in that game against the Wildcats, one of the driving forces to Iowa winning that bowl game over Kentucky. So the combination of Schulte and Nwamka going to be very big back there in the secondary. I love what Iowa brings back in the secondary. The ball Hawkeyes are going to be back again. Now, following the loss of Terry Roberts, Jamari Harris, the senior, is going to expect to step up at that other corner spot this season. He was injured all of 2022, but when you go back to 2021, he played a pretty big part in this offense, especially in that ability to create turnovers. 34 tackles in 2021. He was tied with Riley Moss for team leads in interception. He had 4 interceptions back in 2021. So this is just another guy. I say it, I sound like a broken record. Iowa can take the football away. They are an aggressive defense. That's what makes them dangerous. If this offense can step up, this defense is going to get a little bit of a break, and you're really going to take advantage of the fruits of the labor, so to speak, on defense. Jamari Harris going to have to step up at corner after being injured last season. A lot of youth in the secondary, though. Those are 4 really good guys for the Iowa Hawkeyes, but TJ Hall, a sophomore, and lots of freshmen are behind those guys as well. So if 1 or 2 of those guys get hurt, there's a lot of youth and inexperience back there. So maybe not a ton of depth behind those first 4 guys. We're going to find out just how talented those other guys are. Now, when you're replacing at linebacker Jack Campbell and Seth Benson, boy, that's a tall task because you can't replace these guys. Okay, what these guys meant to Iowa football and the production and what they led on the defensive side of the football, you can't be replaced, but you can sure give it the old college try. And they did that in the transfer portal. Nick Jackson, the transfer from Virginia, started 33 games with the Cavaliers, 354 tackles, 20 TFLs, and 10.5 sacks over his Virginia career. Second team All-ACC last year. 3 consecutive seasons with 100 tackles. 2020, he had 103. 2021, he had 117. 2022, he had 104, 5 sacks last season. This is another great addition to this Iowa defense. And I didn't mention about linebackers, the transfer of Justin Jacobs, which is key as well. You know, he was kind of expected to step up into a starting linebacker role this season, but with him transferring to Oregon, you lose 3 guys in that linebacking core. So one might think you might take a step back, but I just don't know how big of a step back because Nick Jackson is a really good option at linebacker out of the transfer portal. Jay Higgins, 40 tackles, 1.5 TFLs last year. Kyler Fisher, an underclassman, might expect to contribute as well. So I think you're going to take a little bit of a step back at the linebacker spot. I don't know how much. I think Nick Jackson is going to be a big part of that. Let's see if Iowa can kind of build around it. Boy, I love the secondary for Iowa. But man, I really love that defensive line. This is going to be one of the best defensive lines in the Big Ten Conference this season. Take a deep breath, Ted, because there's a lot to talk about here. Deontay Craig and Joe Evans at the ends. Logan Lee and Noah Shannon up front at the tackles. This is a defensive line that is going to cause some problems, folks. All right, let's talk about Noah Shannon. 44 tackles last season, 8th on the team, 8.5 tackles for loss. That was tied for 2nd on the team. Honorable mention, all Big Ten last season. How about Deontay Craig coming off the edge? 10.5 tackles for loss last season. Tied for the team lead with Lucas Van Ness, so he's on that level in terms of getting into the backfield. 6 sacks. Preseason second team All-Big Ten, according to Phil Steele. 3 forced fumbles, led the team. Deontay Craig is going to be a problem this season. You know, now he's going to be the main guy coming off the edge, but he's got some good company on the other edge as well that offensive lines and pass protection are going to have to pay attention to. But I could really see Deontay Craig really bursting forward and becoming a big-time playmaker on the defensive line. Going back to the middle, you look at Logan Lee, 53 tackles. 5th on the team last season, 8 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. Preseason second team All-Big Ten, according to Phil Steele. How about Joe Evans on the other side of the defensive line? 8.5 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks last season, 2nd on the team in sacks. Joe Evans was last season. How about 2 forced fumbles as well? I really love what they have coming off the defensive ends. I think Joe Evans and Deontay Craig are going to be really, really good. And then when they keep coming off the edge and they keep coming, and everybody's focused on them, I could see some pressure coming up the middle as well with Noah Shannon and Logan Lee. You got to factor in Aaron Graves as well, the sophomore. As a freshman last season, 6 tackles for loss and 3 sacks. Very highly recruited. A lot of Iowa fans very excited about this kid in the future because he is the future. There's 3 seniors on this defensive line for Iowa. Aaron Graves is going to step up. You got to think when these guys leave after this year, but he's going to be involved in this defensive line rotation. They have 5 guys that are really, really good. This is going to be a nasty defensive line. And there's a lot of nasty defensive lines in the Big Ten, but Iowa has maybe one of the deepest in the entire conference. So we talked about offense. We've talked about defense. Maybe the biggest weapon for the Iowa Hawkeyes will come on special teams in the form of the best punter in the game, Tory Taylor. This guy with one swing of the leg can impact a game. His ability to get the ball inside the 10, inside the 5, and just watch the ball die back there. This special teams unit and Tory Taylor, what he's able to do, because that I think really feeds into what the defense wants to do and how the defense wants to attack. If Tory Taylor can continuously and consistently pin teams inside the 10, inside the 5, that creates such a difficult situation for opposing offenses, and especially when you have that Kinnick Stadium crowd right on top of you as well. He is a weapon, maybe as big as any on this team. Tory Taylor, preseason first-team All-American as well, first-team All-American punter last season by Phil Steele and Pro Football Focus. So Tory Taylor, as big a weapon as any on this Iowa football team. Okay, 7-5 in the season, regular season last year. Can they turn it around to possibly head to a Big Ten championship? When I look at the schedule, September 9th at Iowa State. Of course, they lost to the Cyclones at home last season. Rivalry games are always a toss-up, and this is one of those teams. I think Iowa's a much better team on paper than the Cyclones, but going on the road to Ames, of course, will be a challenge over there. Of course, Penn State, whiteout on the road. It's going to be tough, but this is a semi-favorable schedule. If they can get by Iowa State, Michigan State, and Purdue at home, that game against Wisconsin could determine the Big Ten West Championship. Who's playing in Indianapolis? Both Wisconsin and Iowa could have very good records going into that game. That could be one of the Big Ten's biggest games of the season. A favorable schedule, I believe, for the Iowa Hawkeyes. When you kind of take a look at some of their tougher road games, Penn State and Wisconsin certainly stand out, but this is doable for Iowa to maybe go 9-3, to maybe go 10-2, and get back to Indianapolis once again. Look, we know the struggles that Iowa went through last season, and it's well documented what needs to happen this season for a guy like Brian Ferentz to keep coaching going into 2024. But this offense, I believe, will be improved for the Iowa Hawkeyes. They have got pieces that fit their system. They're great transfer fits right now, and we'll see if this defense on the other side of the ball can continue to give other team fits. It's a great combination of everything you kind of put together for Iowa Hawkeye football, but the question is, can it be enough to get Iowa back to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game?
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.